Welcome once again to the Retirement Blueprint with Tim Lofton. I'm your host, Spike Spengel. Every single week we talk about retirement planning strategies for you, our viewers out there. Tim, how are you doing this week, buddy?
Doing great, Spike. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very excited about talking about how exactly we look at the mechanics of getting through retirement. That's what we're going to be covering on today's show. In fact, we've got an amazing discussion. We're going to start with pension plans. Now, I know a lot of you out there might not have pensions, but you might know a loved one who does, or it might be your spouse or your partner. So there's a few different things we're going to talk about. What do you think right now when you see people come into the office? How many people do still have a good old-fashioned pension?
You know, surprisingly, quite a few. We have, obviously, Wright Pat Air Force Base right here in town. And so you see a lot of that. We have a lot of universities in Ohio. And so you have all of the different pensions with all the funny letters of OPERS and, deferred comp and STRS and all these different synonyms. But, we see quite a few actually, but understand the average age of our client as more younger people come in, we're seeing less and less of them.
We've talked about on previous programs how responsibility today for retirement is pretty much on our shoulders now. We've got those 401ks or 403bs or even 457s, and we have to have a part in our savings. But just to share some statistics that you actually provided for me, for our viewers out there, the percentage of workers in the private sector whose retirement account is defined pension plan is now down to about 4%, from 60% in the 1980s. We're under single digits today for how many people actually have their own pension plans. About 14% of companies offer some kind of combination. I mean, that would be more like your 457 if you were a security, somebody who provides a sheriff or police protection here. You've got a bit of your own savings component, a bit of the component saved for you by the state, the government, your community, which is wonderful.
And it takes into consideration, too, the people that had an old pension plan that became frozen, then were introduced to a 401k, and so that's factoring into that number, too. So that number even is still a little high.
Well, there's another concept, though, that I want to ask you about, and that's, do pensions themselves ever actually fail? I'm thinking of one big pension right now here in the United States called Social Security, and I'm worried about that down the road. What about actual pension plans, though? We
have. I mean, it's companies you've heard of, Spike. You ever heard of Delta Airlines by chance?
Sure. They stranded me in an airport a few weeks ago.
National Steel, TWA, right here in Dayton, Delphi. Pensions have failed. If you look at the top 10 list, the way that it sits right now, you're talking about 550,000 plus retirees who actually experience the loss of a pension.
Wow. And I mean, these are often things then that are non-recoverable, Sometimes I've heard of pension plans having to take a 20 or a 30% reduction, or telling you it's going away completely. So this is a big question when it comes to your retirement planning. So especially if you haven't jumped off into retirement and you're considering this 2 or 3 years from now, the question, should I take a lump sum and manage my money on my own, or should I let the company manage the pension for me? When you get that question, where do you tend to lean?
Well, Spike, it really just depends. First of all, some pensions don't even have that option. And so you'll see pensions that only have the benefit for the employee. For those people who do have a survivorship, which is a large percentage of them, it depends on a lot of different factors. Things like age difference with spouse. So if you have a spouse, for example, that is 9, 10, 11 years younger, maybe it's a second marriage or a situation like that, having a survivorship pension may make a ton of sense to cover the spouse. You also have to factor in, can I take the pay cut? Because when I elect to have that survivor option on my pension, they're actually going to decrease my pension payments to cover that extra life, right? And so, as you kind of look down through some of those considerations, things like longevity. What's your family history? You know, do your family live into their 90s, or do they pass away in their 60s? All of those things factor in.
Right.
And that's exactly the type of thing that with the retirement blueprint that we look at and sit down with people to try and help them navigate that very important decision.
Well, it's somebody who has a pension or somebody who has Social Security in their own savings. They might think, well, I don't need a retirement financial advisor because I already know that I have these fail-safes. But putting together the retirement blueprint, are you able to work with somebody's pension plan at the same time?
We do, and Spike, I can share a story with you if you don't mind.
Sure, please do.
We had a client, the Johnsons, and he flew for Delta Airlines. Great guy, great family, loved them to death, and he did everything right. He saved, paid off all of his debt, was a great dad, great husband, and went out to his mailbox one day and got a letter from Delta that said, sorry, you're not going to get your pension anymore.
What?
Yeah.
How could? Now, this is what I'm talking about, is that when a pension disappears, and we're not saying it's going to happen to yours, folks, we're not going to saying it's happening to everyone, but you don't have that 20 or 30 years to make back that savings that you could have been doing along the way.
Well,
what did you talk about then with Mr. Johnson?
For him, it was a third of his income. And so when you're talking about a third of your income going away, and Spike, you're right, it's unlikely that anything would happen to someone's pension. But the fact is that it has in the past. Companies that I just named that everybody here in Dayton has heard of. And so you have to at least have a backup plan. For them, interestingly enough, we had a plan, not the plan that Delta was going to stop sending a check anymore, but we had a plan because that pension did not have a survivorship option. And so what we did was we created an additional bucket of money that in the event that he were to pass away, that we would be able to turn that income on, that would go to Mrs. Johnson, and she would be able to basically replace that pension income. So what we did is we turned it on early. He didn't pass away, his pension went away. But the same problem existed that we were able to solve with another solution that we had set aside for their planning needs.
And this is part of the reason why preemptive planning for your retirement is so important. You might think that you're going to be okay having a pension plan on your own, that you've done enough in savings, that Social Security is going to be there for you, but I tell you, sometimes they're not necessarily guarantees. So sitting down with a planner ahead of your retirement is probably a good idea. Now, I know that we've got the phone number here. Maybe you could explain a little bit more for everybody exactly what is the retirement blueprint. You say it's trademarked. I just found that out myself. Tell the folks out there what it means to you.
Our retirement blueprint is a process. It's a process that we have taken to help people just like you to be able to sit down and look at what is your income plan? What is your plan for investment? How much risk are you able to take or not take? What are you going to do in the event of a nursing home stay? How do taxes and inflation impact your plan? And what about longevity and your estate plan? And what happens after you're gone? This is all part of the comprehensive conversation that we will have with you for free to be able to sit down at our table and just get to know you. Let you get to know us. See what we can do to help to make your retirement the best retirement it can be.
Tim, we're going to take a very short break right now. We're going to continue to talk about retirement solutions. Folk, you are watching The Retirement Blueprint with Tim Lofton, sponsored by Axum Planning and Wealth. We want to make sure that you get your own retirement blueprint. It's going to take a look at your investments, your taxes, your estate planning, even your medical choices, everything from Medicare to do you need to have long-term care solutions. All of that packaged together is called The Retirement Blueprint. And to get yours started complimentary, just call the phone number you see right here, 855-684-3485. More with Tim Lofton right after this.
We're passionate about making sure our clients live stress-free in retirement. We do that with the Retirement Blueprint. It's our trademark planning process designed to help you navigate to and through retirement. When you're nearing retirement, it's essential that you have a written plan. and know exactly how that plan will work for you. Let us show you how 27 years of experience can make a difference in your plan.
Welcome back to the Retirement Blueprint with Tim Lofton. I'm your host, Spike Spengel, and we're talking a little bit about, the safety of pension plans. Can we really rely on them? I know there's large organizations out there. They have millions, billions of dollars in their trust fund, but even some of the largest organizations sometimes can run a little bit tight. We don't know that every single industry is going to stay exactly the same. So since you've reviewed a lot of pensions, maybe you can talk to me about some of the different choices in there, such as survivorship. How can someone who hasn't turned on their pension plan review some of their own internal choices?
Well, most of these plans have a dedicated phone number, a dedicated group that you can actually call. A lot of times there's an online portal that you can sign into, and actually they'll have things like retirement plan calculators and some of these different tools that kind of make assumptions that if you keep working and doing the things that you're doing every day, that by the time you get to retirement, here's an estimate of what you will have. But at the end of the day, the biggest thing is looking at the whole picture. It's not just what am I going to get in pension, but is it enough? Am I going to have enough income when I actually get to retirement? And do I need to subsidize that income with additional savings?
Right. So you mentioned before on our previous segment, we don't always necessarily marry somebody from the same grade, right? So we might have a little bit of age difference, savings difference. We're wondering about our own longevity. How do you help people make those choices with the pension plan?
Well, when it comes to the claiming of the pension, it really comes down to understanding each individual that we're meeting with. If it's a husband and wife, for example, we're looking at things like life expectancy on both sides. We're looking at things like, do each of them have a pension? If they both have a pension,
wonderful.
They may be self-insured at the loss of a spouse. Is there Social Security involved or not? A lot of times, here in the state of Ohio, if you have one of the state pensions, a lot of times you don't have Social Security. And so it's kind of one or the other. And so there's a lot of different factors that go into what do we actually want to do with our claiming strategy. Even how many years I should work. It's amazing to me when you look at the reports that people bring into our office, and at 25 years they get $3,000 a month, and at 30 years they get $6,000. Just a few more years can make an enormous difference in making sure that you know and understand that, and how that impacts your retirement is what we do every day.
Right. And this might happen every now and then. I've just got to ask the question, what happens if a spouse passes away before they've actually turned on their pension? The spouse who, let's just say, is at home. You just gave an example where somebody has, or both of you have pensions. Let's say somebody stayed at home, took care of the kids, took care of the family, the household manager, the household executive, right? But what happens if their spouse passes and that pension wasn't turned on? Does that mean that income won't be there at all?
Most likely. In many cases, and Spike, this is probably one of the most difficult situations that we see. Because, for example, our clients, the McKenzies, they had done everything right. They had Social Security, pension, but Mr. McKenzie had the bulk of those because, in your example right there, Mrs. McKenzie basically had stayed home, had raised the kids, had done, all of those wonderful things.
Home executive.
Home executive, right? And so when he passed away early, we ended up with a situation where we had a big problem, right? And so the solution there was, and we hear this from people all the time when they come in the office, is, well, Tim, I've got life insurance. I've got life insurance, I'm going to be okay. And we'll say, well, how much, life insurance do you have? And they'll say, well, Tim, we've got it covered. We've got $1 million life insurance. And we look at their income, and we say, well, based on your income, so let's say, for example, that they have $100,000 of income. and they have $1 million of life insurance. Well, that $1 million of life insurance is going to give them about $50,000 of income.
Wait a minute, why? Why did you cut it in half? Why did you cut it down so much?
Because they can't take out more than a 5% withdrawal rate to replace that income.
Oh, okay.
And so when you look at, it's not just a big number, it's the right number. And making sure that you've done the calculations to make sure that, that was the case. In the McKinsey's case, they had about a 60% decrease with pension and Social Security.
Oh, I didn't even think about the Social Security factor of it.
Yeah. So she actually had about the same amount of Social Security that he did. And, that's another, benefit, obviously, if she had no Social Security, she could have claimed his. But before the kids were born, she'd gotten enough years in and actually had a pretty decent Social Security built up. And she had gone back to work after the kids had left. And so as we were looking at that scenario, we had the life insurance that came in once he had passed away to be able to replace that income. And it was key. I mean, what
was the rest? I mean, can you tell me a little bit about the ages? What was the rest of their dynamic? Did they have kids? I'm guessing if he was still working, was the home paid off? What else? Because when you said $1 million in life insurance, I was like, oh yeah, well I can divide that out and figure out the income. But wait a minute, there were other assets. There could have been kids. There could have been a whole rest of life that we need to fund. Is $1 million even enough today?
No, it's not. And so that's the rest of the story, Spike. So we ended up, they had a house that was paid for in Florida that she ended up having to sell, and that helped with kind of shoring things up. The house that they had here in Dayton, they also had to sell and downsize, but there was enough assets there, luckily, to be able to kind of replace, what was lost. But it could have been so much easier. If we had been in a scenario where they had more life insurance, they would have been she wouldn't have been forced into making a decision like that.
Right. And well, it was nice to have had those assets. I'm sure they didn't want to give up the family vacation home in Florida, but when you're up against the wall, you've got to make those decisions. And I think that's what we're trying to say is that even with a pension plan, we need to make sure that you're taking a look at all the other factors. Your insurance. Do you have an estate plan? So that was some of it as well. When she made the phone call to you, what was that like? I mean, these are the kinds of phone calls that I'm sure you don't like taking, but that you are prepared to because this is what you do in the office. What was the initial conversation like?
Well, the initial conversation, Spike, was difficult for sure. And 30 years of sitting across from a spouse that's lost another spouse is always difficult. There's no words that fix that problem. The thing that I think gave her confidence was that we did have a plan. We did have a plan in place. She had sat through many, many reviews over the years and was familiar with the plan. And so nothing can fix that situation. But at least that there's going to be money coming in, that we are able to right the ship, that we are able to make some adjustments on the fly to make sure that person's going to be okay. Right.
So that's what we're going to do for the viewers. I've got to take a very quick break right now. Folks, why don't you get started on your own retirement blueprint? Are you in your 40s, your 50s, your 60s? It's not too late to get started on your blueprint. What Tim can identify is, are there gaps in your safety plan? Do we need more in life insurance? Do we need to take a look at the risk you're taking inside your investments? Here's one thing to consider. Are you taking too much risk or too little risk? We need to make sure that your investments are going to last all the way through your retirement. All of these decisions and more, including your health and your estate planning, are covered by getting started on the retirement blueprint. Call the phone number you see right here, 855-684-3485, so you can get started on your own complimentary retirement blueprint. More with Tim Lofton right after this.
Retirement is about choosing where you want to go and mapping out a plan to get there. That's why I created the Retirement Blueprint. Of course, things don't always go according to plan. Come learn how our team can help you avoid potential hazards and find alternate routes. We're here to do life with you and share your journey. Let us blueprint your life to keep you on track to make sure you get the most out of retirement. Are you on the road to success? Call us today for a complimentary review to find out. Let us plan your tomorrow today.
Welcome back to the Retirement Blueprint with Tim Lofton of Axum Planning and Wealth. I'm your host, Spike Spengel, and we're talking about your retirement solutions, making sure that you're covered. A lot of times we have a pension plan that is offered at work. I mean, there are fewer and fewer and fewer today. But even with a pension plan, everything is not guaranteed. There are a few guarantees in life, Tim, right? Besides the fact that you and I are going to show up every single week and help people with their retirement planning.
And death and taxes.
And death and taxes. Speaking of, if you don't mind, since you sit with clients every single day in your offices, maybe you could help me with another case study. What are the kind of blind spots that you help people with? Is there a family that you've experienced recently?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that we often talk about with every new client is life insurance. And it's one of those subjects where people are like, oh, I don't like life insurance, or, you know, whatever the case may be.
Or I've got it covered at work.
I've got it covered at work. I've got 2 times my salary, 3 times my salary. And, you know, recently we had a client, the Lowe's, that actually came to us. And they were not originally our clients, but they became our clients. And this was one of those situations that's, you know, it happens more than you think. The husband was covered by a pension, but never got to the pension. Mm-hmm. He passed away before then. And he was only 41 years old. And so, you know, one of the problems that a lot of times we don't think about is it's not just the income replacement for the spouse that passes away, it's also the savings that gets lost. Because if you think about, you know, in his case, he was saving almost $17,000 a year in a retirement plan, was going to be doing that for another 24 years, and all of a sudden is not. And so what we had calculated for them to have in retirement all of a sudden got derailed. And so when you're looking at that income gap, life insurance is just a really
life
inexpensive
insurance isn't
way.
just the replacement of the salary. It's also what you're adding in there is that factor of how much would you have saved in another 20 to 25 years of working at the minimum, because we know that the 401k limits were 17 and then 17.5 and then 18 and so forth, so it goes up, and then you've got catch-up provisions. So we're talking couple $400,000, $500,000 in savings that wasn't there and wasn't compounded on in interest and earnings over time. So the insurance isn't just about replacing the actual salary. We've got to take into account what other savings would have been on the side. Right,
and it really comes down to doing the math behind it. It's not just about just picking a random number and saying, well, I'm going to get $1 million or $2 million of insurance. It's a matter of backing into the need by what the income requirement is going to be to replace that spouse's income, to send the kids to college, to pay off the house, to cover the debts. Factoring in all of those calculations, when you think about how inexpensive term insurance is, it doesn't make sense not to cover that. And most of the time it doesn't happen because we're looking at these big numbers and we say $1 million and it sounds like a lot of money. Except that when we start looking at that income replacement, I mean, in his case, he was making $175,000 a year. You know, I mean, you're talking about a life insurance need of probably $3.5 million. Just to replace the income.
I'm guessing again in the 40s, probably the house wasn't paid off. So you've got your retirement savings accounts, your 401ks or whatever would have been over here. The money that he would have been putting into having equity into a home that hopefully would have been growing over time, along with the life insurance, along with his earnings that hopefully also would have gone up over time, right? He's making a very good living right now. Could have been making 200, 300, you know, down the road. So all of it actually compounds. And so I do want to ask you though, were you able to help with any kind of solutions for his remaining family?
Well, I mean, the difficulty was really with, you know, what they had was not replaceable because the life insurance that they had was going to cover them for about 5 or 6 years. And this case study is really more about what they could have done.
Yeah.
I mean, for about $3,000 a year, he could have had the $3.5 million of insurance that he needed. He was making $175,000 a year. It was a very inexpensive fix to totally make this problem go away.
You know, a lot of times we've talked about this before. We will insure our health, we will insure our automobiles, we'll insure our homes, and sometimes we forget to insure our own income. And what is the income replacement of it? So this person, 41, when we're putting together what is obviously known here on the program as the retirement blueprint, it sounds like there's no time that's too early to start thinking about the retiring.
Well, there's not. I mean, plans don't just happen. Your goals you don't just wake up one day and magically everything is the way that it's supposed to be. It takes a plan. And the idea of the retirement blueprint is to be able to sit down and understand where somebody's going and then put together a plan to get them there.
Right, right. So if you don't mind, before we wrap up today's program, I know we talk about it every week, but maybe you could explain to people what exactly is the retirement blueprint? How does it help provide, let's say, comfort and at least understanding what the plan is? What is it to you?
Well, the comfort comes, Spike, from having the unknowns known. It's about knowing, you know, how much do I need to be saving on a monthly basis to replicate my income in retirement? How do I not run out of money? What's my tax strategy going to be? What is inflation going to do to my retirement, and how do I combat that? And how do I take care of my loved ones after I've passed away with an estate plan? This and other things we cover comprehensively in that retirement blueprint. And the greatest piece of this is that it's free for somebody to sit down and talk to us.
All they got to do is pick up the phone, give us a call, right?
Right.
Folks, to get your retirement blueprint, just consider this. Are you worried about making sure you don't run out of money in retirement? Are you worried about making sure that your spouse, your loved ones will be covered so they don't have to go out to continue to work or change out what was going to be their life plan? Get started on the retirement blueprint. Give us a call right here, 855-684-3485. The retirement blueprint is going to take a look at your investments. What is your tax situation? Make sure that you have your estate planning solutions in place. And when I say estate planning, this isn't about having millions and millions of dollars. It's just making sure if you're going to leave money to someone that there's a plan and a place for it. All by calling 855-684-3485. Thank you for watching the Retirement Blueprint. We'll be back again next week.